Look what I got at Kohl's today. I thought this was really cute. For $14.99, it says coffee because adulting is hard. I thought that was like the perfect t-shirt for me. So, Kohl's has actually some nice t-shirts, but unfortunately the ones with like shows and movies and like the comic stuff on them are like $20, which isn't the worst price in the world, but for some people on limited income, that's not ideal. And like I said, this was like $15, so it was a little bit cheaper. I thought that was really cute. But anyway, okay, so back to why I make these videos in the first place, and that is talking about books. So this is a question I've been thinking. This is something I've been thinking about for a while, and I've seen BookTube videos. I mean, I haven't actually watched them, but I've come across some videos that talk about this particular topic, and that is future classics. Now, because some of these could potentially already be considered classics, it's debatable because, I mean, I don't know if there's like a document or official place where books are officially labeled classics. Like, when was Frankenstein, or when was The Great Gatsby, or any Mark Twain's novels, so on and so forth, when were they considered classics? I mean, is it documented that they're considered classics, or is it just as soon as you study them in school, then they're considered classics? So I don't know. But I mean, that's why one of the books I thought about, I wasn't sure, because a friend of mine and I got into a bit of a small argument about it. Like, there was a book that I said I wouldn't consider it a classic just yet, but then she made some really good points, and I was forced to, okay, at the time I kind of was a little annoyed, but as, you know, after I calmed down a little bit, I was like, okay, fine, she's a good point. And I admit that, yeah, maybe it is considered a classic, and I kind of changed how I would label these. Like how I would title this list that I'm slowly compiling. So I started a Word document list of 4 books, but 2 of them I don't have. The other 2 I do have, and one of the 2 that I don't have, I actually haven't read it, but I feel like with the subject matter that it's about, I feel like that would make it a classic and something worth studying in school. But maybe that's not enough. Maybe, you know, there's a lot more contributing factors. Like, I think the subject matter and the theme, I mean, like, well, I guess themes are part of the subject matter. And, like, if it's something that schools teachers in school would consider studying the book, that's how I think it's labeled. And if it has universal appeal, I think that can make it a classic. But the one that I'll tell you the ones that I'm thinking about that I don't actually have in my possession, and then I'll talk about the 2 that I actually do have. And that is, the one I haven't read is The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. Now, like I said, it's the subject matter that I feel like it would be labeled classic. Now, maybe I'm wrong here, but it's about an important issue about racism and how racism still exists. In police brutality, that's the big thing now. That's one of the important issues in today's world. And I think that would make it a very important and worth discussing in schools. Now, I haven't read it, of course, so I don't know how good it really is, and I don't know about the quality of the writing or anything like that. But I could see teachers, if they're, teachers taking this book and putting it down, like the Board of Education putting that down on the list of books you can read. Because I think what they do is they have a list of a whole bunch of books. They compile a list of a whole bunch of books that you could study and learn a lot from, and there's a lot of themes in there that they want you to learn about and study in school. And then they go through it and probably select the books that they want each teacher to cover. So, But I think, like, because of what it's about, I feel like it's something that could be considered a classic in the future. And it's a very popular book, partly because of what it's about, and partly also because it probably is a good story. A good, well-written story. I mean, I don't know because I haven't read it. I'm just going by what I do know about it. Now, the other one that I don't have in my possession is Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. Now, I think this would be considered a classic because it's, first of all, it's another dystopian. And back in, like, a long time ago, they had books like 1984, The Giver, although The Giver's not that old, it's like 10, 20 years old. Because I think it came out in the 90s. And there's Fahrenheit 451. And those are both dystopians, and that came out before dystopian became a thing, became a popular concept, a popular genre to write about. So I think dystopian will still be popular. And it's about, like, an extreme version of our fears and our concerns. And, like, the Hunger Games looks at, you know, how, like, reality TV and how we're easily entertained, even if it involves violence and humiliating people on live TV. Like, it's just entertainment for us. It, like, provides commentary on that and provides commentary on social norms, and it looks at, it, like, explores a lot of very interesting themes. So I think it would definitely be worth looking at in schools. And it's not that long of a book. Like, that's the other thing, is sometimes I feel like the books that are actually studied in school, that they actually have kids read, are books that aren't, like, not that hard to read. And, like, you never see people, I mean, maybe in college, but, like, a book like Lord of the Rings or Gone with the Wind even, you don't study those in school because they're so long and so dense. So I think it would take a long period of time, and it would probably be the only book you would look at, you know, in that class, unless it's like a college course. Like, in college, I think you could study a book that is that size, that length, and that number of pages. And The Hate U Give is also a book that doesn't take that long either. Now, I do realize, of course, that the Hunger Games, they might not want to study books that are trilogies or series, because they take, you know, like, it's over in, I mean, that's like equivalent, that is actually kind of equivalent to something like Lord of the Rings, which is also a trilogy, unless you count The Hobbit with it. So I don't know, they might have, you know, in schools and stuff, they might have something against reading books that have, like, sequels. So, I mean, I don't know, though. I think you can read, like, The Hunger Games, and I think you can read it without having to absolutely read the first book, because first book, like a lot of first books in the series, it ends, you know, at a good point. There's no cliffhanger. I mean, sometimes half the time, first books do end with a cliffhanger, and the other half don't. And you just, like, for example, A Darker Shade of Magic, to me that kind of ends in a way that you don't have to read the the next two books, unless you are really interested in the series, in the trilogy, I should say. Like, I think they don't end on a cliffhanger. And the same thing, like, with ACOTAR, and Court of Thorns and Roses, it doesn't necessarily end on a cliffhanger. Well, actually, no. I mean, ACOTAR does kind of end, because something like Rhysand has this moment with Freya, and you have this moment of, we're gonna see what happens next. Like, it's not completely, so there's a little bit of a hint that there's more going on, that there's more to continue. She's gonna continue it if you didn't know already. But, like, Hunger Games, I feel like the first book ends not where you absolutely have to read the next book. Okay, now let's talk about the two that I do have that I'm going to devote the rest of this video to. So, the first book that I think would be a future classic or 21st century classic is Stephen King's It, which is a horror novel, and it actually is one of those books that you you know, maybe you study in college, but not like in high school. I mean, this is a big chunker. This is over 1,000 pages. I mean, like this edition that I have here is, let's see, how many pages? Is 1,473 pages. So the reason why I think this would be considered a classic is because it explores a lot of themes about, first of all, the obvious one is friendship and how strong friendship is and how important it is to have and how it can, you know, love and friendship can be the thing that defeats the monster, defeats the evil of the world. And I mean, and like it's what helps them defeat the evil monster entity, Pennywise, is because they were working together. They were all together in this. And actually, they focus more on that in the new movie. And at one point, all the group of kids, when they're kids, they all almost walk away from each other. And Beverly says to them, but it wants to divide us. This is what it wants. Because they start fighting about it. Because, I mean, they're terrified of this big, huge monster that they can't fight. I mean, they almost got their friend Eddie killed. But at the same time, and then meanwhile, Bill wants to avenge his brother. You know, and wants to, you know, be, you know, safe and like, and it brings, and you know, that causes conflict amongst the group members. And it's just Beverly and Bill who want to fight the monster while the others are like, I can't do this. I can't handle this. We can't fight that thing. And I think the miniseries, they kind of deal that too, where the character of Richie, you know, is like, I can't do this anymore, and kind of, excuse me. The one that wants to walk away from the group. So anyway, it explores themes of love and friendship, and it also looks at because of the time period this is set in, and this is set in the 50s, and then the new movie, their childhood is in the 1980s. But this deals with a lot of issues like racism, and you know, and in the like this book goes back and forth between the past and the present. And in the present of when this book takes place, which is there's the whole issue of gay rights and everything, and they delve into that a little bit. And we also, like, there's prejudice for it, because there's the one kid in this in the group of friends that happens to be a black kid, and there was still plenty of racism against black people at the time when this plot takes place. And then there's also, you know, the one girl in the group is from a poor family. Her dad's a janitor. Her mom is like her mom is in the book, but she's not even, like, she's barely in the book, but she's not in the movie version. She's, you know, we don't ever see her. Now, I don't remember if maybe she's just mentioned in the book, or she's actually there, or like Beverly's remembering her mom and the advice her mom would give her and stuff. And there's also this undertone of that her father is into her sexually. So it explores themes of sexual orientation, and there's also and then there's a little bit of religious prejudice, there's a little bit of prejudice against religion, because there's one character in here that happens to be Jewish, and he's bullied because of that. Like, all the kids in this book are, like, they experience some form of bullying, and some of them, it's because of their differences. Their, you know, societal related differences. Like I said, the one kid happens to be Jewish. That's his religion. And then there's the girl, she's the one girl in the group. And I don't remember if it's in the book. I mean, I'm reading it, but I don't remember every detail. And I've taken a big long break since then. But she's in the movie. She is portraying. There's this rumor, these horrible rumors going on about her that she's slept around, that she's a slut, or what is equivalent to a slut in middle school, because I think they're middle schoolers, and so not only does she experience these horrible, distasteful rumors about her, but there's also, there's the prejudice thing, and then there's the fact that she's this young girl becoming a woman, and her dad is all has these dirty thoughts about her. And then, of course, and then there's the one black kid in the group. And how they're always, he gets bullied because he's a black kid, and they're like, get out of my, and the school bullies are like, get out of my town. So it explores prejudice, racism, hatred, and through the context of a horror story. I love it when stories, whether it's a book or a movie, where they explore some issues, but it's not done directly. Like that new movie, what is that called? The black kid who goes to meet his white girlfriend's family. I can't remember what it's called. Get Out. The movie Get Out. I want to see that because I love how that one explores kind of the themes of racism, but through the lens of a horror film. And, from what I've gathered in the previews, the white people in this town use hypnotism to control the black people in the town. So and that's not a spoiler because I don't know exactly what it's about. I haven't seen the movie, but that's just going by the previews. That's what it looks like they're doing in that story. And then there's Pleasantville. Pleasantville is one of my all-time favorite movies, and it kind of reminds me of Fahrenheit 451. This idea of trying to make everybody happy and living in this perfect paradise world and having simple ideas and not challenging your way of thinking, or and getting rid of anything controversial makes you question things like books. And that's what they do in Fahrenheit, that they burn the books because it takes away everybody's happiness. There's not enough diversity in books, so their solution is to burn the books. And at the time when I talked about that book on my last wrap up, I talked about how it's kind of interesting that I was reading Fahrenheit 451, and recently I've been thinking about this a lot, and people have talked about on BookTube quite a bit about diversity and how authors need to be more diverse. And it's he'll be it would basically be because Sarah J. Maas doesn't have diversity, let's burn all her books because people that are of a different religion, a different race, Sarah J. Maas doesn't explore that in her books, so let's just burn her books. That's basically what Fahrenheit 451 was about. But anyway, I like books like that and movies like that explore those kind of issues, but in the lens of something that's entertaining and really not just a textbook or just people telling you about these issues, or it's upfront obviously about that. And so I think this will be considered, if it's not already, I think this should be considered a classic. It explores so many themes, and I would love for college, and I think a lot of Stephen King's books explore very interesting themes, and I would love to take a class on Stephen King. In fact, one of my favorite booktubers, I think it was Peter Likes Books, he was talking about in one of the colleges near him, or the college he went to, that they did study Stephen King. I think. I'm not 100% sure, so take that with a grain of salt. But I think I would love to take a class where we studied Stephen King and his work. And I definitely want to read more of his stuff. Like, I have The Shining, for instance, and I need to finish the Dark Tower series. But yes, I think this would be a great horror classic. You know, just like H.P. Lovecraft's. I think those are considered classics. Okay, so the next one that I actually have is Harry Potter by J.K. Rowling. Now, this is a novel that, yes, it's a fantasy, but come on, Lord of the Rings is considered a classic. This deals with, first of all, this deals with the theme of good versus evil. And a lot of books, even books that aren't studied in school, deal with that. But the ones that are studied in school are probably deal with it in a more realistic way. This deals with it in a fantastical way. But it doesn't just deal with the issue of good versus evil. This is another book that explores themes of prejudice. I mean, like, they have, it's a world full of wizards, and they have people in the wizard new world that you're born into a wizard family, but you're not a wizard yourself. You're called a squib. That's the racial slur for those who aren't inherently magical, but born into a magical family. And then you have the people that aren't from magical families, but are magical themselves. Like, one of the main characters, Hermione, is one of those people, and they are called mudbloods. And there's a kid in their school. They have the school bully, and he is constantly calling Hermione a mudblood, or is in Chamber of Secrets, there was this monster that would kill all the mudbloods because, the bad guy in this whole series, he was all about believing in purebloods, wizards that are completely magical. They are magical, and their family members are magical. It's in their blood. And, the family, he originally came from one of the he was an ancestor, one of the founding fathers of Hogwarts. And it was their monster that was just released in Chamber of Secrets. You got the Draco Malfoy, the school bully, who was all like, you'll be next, mudbloods. And it also, again, this is another one that explores friendship. And you also have prejudices because, Harry's other best friend, Ron, is from a poor family, and he's a middle child. So, and again, Malfoy makes fun of Ron, and Malfoy's dad makes fun of Ron's family as well, because they're poor. They're not as financially well off. And it looks at, let's see, what else is it? And it's also a universal book. Like, a lot of people love this series and can get into it. And I think that is what makes a book so it's universally appealing. That's what makes it a classic. It's a book that everybody would want to read. And it teaches you a lot of very important things, like about racism, about prejudice. There's a little bit of racism done in a way that is, relatable and fun, and not just straight up telling you about it and how these people experience racism, and, because they were of a different religion or a different skin color. This explores it in a way that's different, that's unique, and makes it easier to understand, I feel like. So that, I'm sorry, I keep moving. It's just now my back is bothering me. Just lay back for a second. Okay. Sorry, well, soon I'll have to start filming. But yeah, so I think this is, and it's another book that's not going to take long to read. Granted, it's middle grade level, but a lot of people in my age group, that's of course partly because we grew up with this series, will get into this book, because who doesn't get into fantasy? I mean, unless you just don't like it and you have a hard time with it, because, the whole idea of another world and sometimes pronouncing the names and like all that kind of stuff can be hard. Not everybody can get into this into magical world. But I think this is, I think this is a classic. And I think this is one, I think teachers should consider studying this book and really looking at some of the themes of this book. Not, it's good versus evil, prejudice, racism. I don't know if teachers have something against fantasy reads, complete fantasy reads, but I don't think, and if that is the case, I don't think it's fair. I think we should be able to, explore books in the education system like Harry Potter. And like It, which is not magical, it's horror, but still, I feel like it's worth exploring and studying them, because just because they're genre fiction and, don't seem academic does not mean that they're not. And that's why you have people that are book snobs, which I see is another thing that they bring up in Fahrenheit 451 about book snobbery, and it's that the main protagonist's boss, who's all for the burning of the books, he brings up the idea of book snobbery, and, he, the plot of the story is that Montag, he starts to, he realizes that there's more to books and that you shouldn't burn them and everything, and he starts stealing books. It's kind of like book thief kind of thing. And his boss discovers, because his Montag's wife, calls the firemen, because they're the ones that burn the books, and he shows up and makes Montag burn his own house and his own books. And he's like, his boss brings up the whole idea of, oh, you think because you're well-read that you're superior to us. Which is not the case. And, but he's not entirely wrong. There is book snobbery in the world. There are some people who think they're superior because they read certain types of books. And I feel like sometimes I wonder if, in a way, it's kind of like that with genre fiction. They feel like genre fiction is beneath them and not worth studying in school because it's just entertainment. It's just fun, and it's not worth studying. You can't, and there's no themes to explore in an academic setting in these books, in genre fiction, which I'm hoping I'm wrong in that assumption. But the closest you get is maybe reading something that's magical realism. We did in college, I had to read Metamorphosis, which is the story about the guy who turns into some kind of insect, like a beetle or something. It's about him transforming, and I did kind of hate that book. It was very depressing because it doesn't, I'm all for not happy endings and everything, but I was not in the mood for that. Especially because I had to read it. But yeah, that's the closest. There's not a lot of books like this that you read in school, that you study in school. The only time you read this is in schools if you actually bring it yourself, and, you read when you're not doing anything, you read for pleasure. But it's, so I'm hoping I'm wrong about that. But yeah, I think Harry Potter is definitely is a classic, and definitely worth looking at in schools. So I guess in a way, my video is not just labeling what books I consider classics, but also books, also kind of rooting for these books to be studied in school, to read in school, and for us to learn about them, and actually take classes where we go through these books and analyze them. Which, now, I hope, though, in the future, if they did do that, if they did look at books like Harry Potter, it wouldn't ruin things for anyone. Because I know when you read books in school, that ends up not being the book. You no longer like the book when you have to study in school, and you have to study the hell out of it, and it just ruins the book, and you're no longer as entertained by it. But hopefully that wouldn't happen if they did decide to do that. So anyway, that's so far. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to probably continue to make this list, and then I'm going to do a Maybe I'll start doing videos, a series of videos where I talk about books that I think would be classics, because I'm sure there are plenty of books on my shelf that you could argue in defense of them being considered classics. like, let's say, I mean, like, I feel like thinking about now as I'm looking at my books, I think, like, The Night Circus could be considered one, because, you know, with the writing and everything. I mean, you never know what books, like, you can only speculate what books that people will study in the future, and maybe they won't study these books in the future. Who knows? But I really hope they do, because I think you could analyze the heck out of these books, and you could get a lot. Just because they're genre fiction does not mean you could get intellectually stimulated by these books and study them in school. So anyway, that's my video. That's my thought on books. At least a few books that I think would be considered classics, or that that are considered classics, or that should be classics if they're not considered classics. So if you like this book, I mean, if you like this if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, and you like what I have to say and like my videos, then please subscribe to my channel. Alright, thank you. Bye.